breaking updates now coming in. An advisor to the IRGC commander has announced that the Strait of Hormuz is now closed and that Iran will set fire to any ship that tries to pass through. Now, this is extremely significant, and this is going to have a huge impact around the world as well. Global oil prices as well could skyrocket. Iran has now made it clear that the Strait of Hormuz is shut. Now, this is the global bargaining chip for Iran, and it has made it clear that Strait of Hormuz is going to be shut. Tehran has targeted infrastructure that is critical to the world's largest energy production as part of its retaliation for the Israeli and U.S. bombing campaign that began on Saturday. So the Strait of Hormuz, which lies between Iran and Oman, is in fact one of the world's most critical oil transit routes, with roughly 20% of global oil supplies passing through it. So any disruptions there will further be sending the crude prices soaring. And this is raising fears of a regional escalation as well, very clearly. So global oil markets are bracing for a potential upward price shock as the trade resumes. Let's go across to my colleague Srinjoy Chaudhary joining us on the broadcast on the details and what this could actually mean. So Srinjoy, there has been a clear indication that things are only escalating from here. Even Trump going on to say that it could drag on for 4 weeks. But Iran now closing down the Strait of Hormuz. What is the significance of it, and what would it mean for the world?
This was widely expected, of course. But what it means is that there will be less supply of oil. And if there is less supply of oil and also uncertainty about oil production and distribution, then oil prices will go up. India will be one of those countries that will be hit because India imports over 80% of its oil requirements. So a lot of it, a huge percentage of it, comes from these regions. Now, let's also not forget that India was importing a substantial amount of Russian oil till very recently. And then after the sanctions on Russian oil, the Indian importers, actually private sector firms, stopped buying a large amount of Russian oil. So as a result, Indian imports of Russian oil has gone down. If that is so, India will have to cover for the fact that there will be a huge increase in prices, oil prices, probably going to above $100 a barrel. Also the fact that supply will have to be more certain and more secure, because if there is a problem with the Straits of Hormuz, oil supplies come down, then prices, of course, will go up. But you will also have to look for more oil in the long term, so on the medium term at least. So let's see how this is dealt with. Luckily, there are other places. How long that will take to be operational, we don't know. For instance, the Canadians were here recently, and Prime Minister Mark Carney and Prime Minister Modi did speak about energy to a huge extent. Of course, nuclear fuel was talked about, uranium was talked about, yes, but also oil and natural gas. So let's see how India deals with it, how the world deals with it. Okay. America doesn't have a problem. It has a lot of oil supplies. But for many other countries like India and China, yes, there will be an issue.
Absolutely. It's been a choke point, and it has been so for decades. Let's take a look at the significance of it. Srinjoy, do stay with us. We have experts also joining us on the broadcast to break it down for us and to speak about what's going to happen next. How do we see this proceeding? But let's talk about why Strait of Hormuz is significant and why India also gets affected. So it is this strait between the Persian Gulf as well as the Gulf of Oman, and this is the strategic choke point very close to Iran, and Iran, of course, has used this as a bargaining chip for decades now. So it has now decided that the Strait of Hormuz is closed on expected lines. This a particular choke point handles transit of 20 to 25% of the global oil supply, which is why the entire world, particularly this region, is going to be affected. Now, there are 20 million barrels of crude oil that pass through it every single day. As of now, what Iran has said is that if there is any movement from this particular choke point, from the Strait of Hormuz, then it will come under attack, which means that there will be no supply, no movement that will take place. So, as you can see, it has Iran on the north, UAE and Oman on the south. And this is the region from there. It can go into the open ocean, and this is in fact the only way it can pass from, which is why the crude prices are expected to soar. Let's introduce guests joining us this morning. We have Captain Alok Bansal joining us on the broadcast, Director of India Foundation, and Pathikrit Payan, geopolitical analyst. We also have Angie Wong, Miami GOP committee woman, joining us on the broadcast with us. Thank you so much, Captain Alok Bansal. On the Strait of Hormuz, like Shanjay was also pointing out, this was on expected lines. That has been the bargaining chip for Iran. But what could it mean for the world in the coming weeks as well? Because as Trump pointed out as well, this is a war that could drag on for the next 4 weeks. We don't know yet what the exit strategy of the U.S. is going to be.
See, firstly, there is no doubt that this would have a huge impact as far as global economics is concerned. Though US is a net exporter of energy, but its allies, Europe, Japan, China, India, all are dependent on Persian Gulf oil. So now this oil not being available, the prices are bound to go up. Secondly, earlier the US has already imposed sanctions on Russian oil companies. So either Trump relaxes its sanctions on Russian oil, otherwise the global prices will very soon cross $100. Thirdly, from India's point of view, we have a serious problem because we have a large chunk of our crude coming from this particular region, and more significantly, about 9 million Indians are in this part of the world, and they are sending about $50 billion worth of remittances every year. So this remittances also comes under pressure because the turbulence will stop the economic activities. Many of these Indians may want to come back. So this is a huge problem for us. As far as energy crisis is concerned, Saudi Arabia has actually a pipeline which runs to the Red Sea ports also. So oil coming from Saudi Arabia could probably still be accessed. If US operationalizes Venezuelan wells faster, then we could probably shift some of our imports from Venezuela, which will be available, Venezuelan oil, but it will take time. And I think we'll have to again start taking oil from Russia, because closure of Strait of Hormuz clearly means that no movement will any movement taking place would be attacked by Iranians. So now with that, and we have already seen one of the tankers being hit, one Indian, I presume the crew has already been killed.
Yes.
So that's a very sad state of affairs, and I think this conflict is aggravating. What is the end state which Trump desires? I don't think so even Trump knows, because Trump has a habit of jumping into things without deciding what the next is going to be happening.
Okay, so I'm going to bring in Angie Wong on that. But before that, while we keep our focus on Strait of Hormuz, let's talk about the significance in the countries that will be affected as well. Let's take a look at where it actually is. Like we just pointed out, it is close to Iran. So Iran has powers over it, which is why it's been closed. It is between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. And it is significant because it's the world's most strategically important choke point, because this is the point from where it can pass through. Any vessels can pass through to go into the open ocean. So that is one choke point which serves as a primary export route for the Gulf producers. So the allies of the US are also going to be affected by this. It allows about 20% of the world's daily oil consumption, and any closure at this point can have an impact on the world. Let's get you more breaking updates now coming in on the broadcast as we get you minute-by-minute updates of what's happening. Now, in the latest, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has defended the strikes on Iran, saying they hit civilians. We are targeting terrorists. Netanyahu going on to say that Israel is protecting civilians, while Iran and its intended target is towards civilians. So Israel going on to say our targets have been terrorists, whereas Iran has targeted civilians in multiple locations, including in Israel as well. All right. So this is the claim that has been made by Iran, and Iran, of course, going on to say that this is self-defense. Israel saying that we have our right to self-defense. Pathikritwen, Israel going on to say that Iran does not have any strategy and is hitting civilians. And unfortunately, we've seen that in multiple locations, including attacks in Dubai. So Iran has made it clear that there is no state that is insulated from these attacks.
Well, good morning, first of all, to all of you. First, the day the attack started, Iran made it very clear that there are no red lines in this conflict. And therefore, they would target almost about everything that they can. And this will be probably applicable for both sides. So to expect any kind of morality, to expect any kind of, do's and don'ts in this conflict, that will be by almost as if being too optimistic. I still believe that the conflict has not yet started, because the manner in which Iran continued its attack on the critical energy infrastructure of the other Arab states, and if they completely choke off the Strait of Hormuz, then a time may come that many of the Arab states join the conflict. And that is something not, a very nice proposition, because then the end game becomes something else. See, I mean, Middle East has a habit. If you look at the trajectory of conflicts in Middle East, none of the conflicts end up within 2 or 3 weeks. The Iraq-Iran war continued for 8 years. Those days, Iraq was a darling of United States. Both the Saudis and the Americans supported Iraq, and yet it continued for 8 years. They could not defeat Iran. So in this case also, my understanding is that U.S. and especially Donald Trump does not have the appetite for long-drawn conflicts. They might in the next 3 or 4 weeks return back saying that our job is done. The regime has changed from Ayatollah Khomeini to somebody else, which means the regime has changed. So now we are going. Then the mess that they are going to the mess they will leave behind in Middle East, that is not going to get sorted out so soon. And that is where the real problem starts.
Okay, all right. And history has suggested every time US has exited a country, it has left it in tatters. We're going to speak about that, but we have some breaking updates now coming in of the massive claim that has been made by Tehran. Iran media going on to say that 40 plus US troops have been killed. The claim is that the US troops were killed in the drone strikes launched by Iran. So IRGC has claimed that 40 American troops, American soldiers have been killed, and that 70 plus have been wounded in the Gulf attack. The IRGC Navy claiming heavy US casualties. Iran's claim is yet to be confirmed though. But we have some more breaking updates now coming in. We have now CENTCOM admitting to the deaths of 6 American soldiers in Iran's attacks. So let's get you what the US Central Command has said, and the update that it has given is that as of 4 p.m. March 2nd, 6 US service members have been killed in action. US forces recently recovered the remains of 2 previously unaccounted for service members from a facility that was struck during Iran's initial attacks in the region. Major combat operations continue. The identities of the fallen are being withheld until 24 hours after the next of kin have been notified. Let's go across to Srinjoy on that. So Srinjoy, there are claims and counterclaims being made, but Iran's claim is that as many as 40 plus US troops have been killed.
This is fog of war. Iran says 40 American soldiers have been killed in the fighting and 70 injured. That's quite a substantial number. Iran has not said where this happened, where the drone strike killed these 40 American servicemen. But we will have to wait and hear from the American side, because they will have to confirm. There has to be confirmation for it. For instance, when those 3 American planes went down, the Kuwaiti government said several American fighter aircraft have gone down. We didn't know how many, whether it was 1 or 2 or 3. Eventually, the Americans confirmed that there were 3. Now, and these were blue-on-blue cases. Now, we are hearing that 40 American soldiers have been killed in the fighting. That's what the Iranians are saying. But the Americans have yet to confirm that this has happened, where this has happened, and how this has happened. So we'll have to hear from the Americans or one of their allies about what the case is, whether it is 40, whether it's more or less or whatever. So an American confirmation on this is awaited.
Okay, so Ms. Angie Wong, how is the United States viewing this? Because Trump had said, I'm not going to start a war, I'm going to stop wars. This is the claim that he had made when he came to power, and clearly that has not been the case. In Iran as well, questions continue on the exit strategy. What's going to happen?
Yes, I was just checking American media. I don't see any reporting on 70 Americans just killed, unless that's breaking news, and it hasn't broke yet. But usually our social media platforms are pretty fast to pick up that type of news. So I don't think there's any substantial reporting there. I think it might just be more propaganda. I want to go back to the oil prices and the closing of the Strait of Hormuz. This is playing exactly to what Trump and Marco Rubio wants, and the Pentagon. This is exactly how they've foreseen it to happen, because who does it really affect? It affects India, and it affects China and everyone who depends on oil coming from that region. The real pressure is really on India and China. So this is exactly what happened in Venezuela. Trump needed to do that operation first, which is to remove Maduro, to secure the Venezuelan oil for U.S. usage as well as our allies, before it moved on to Iran. These things happened in a purposeful, strategic sequence before we can actually go into Iran. So even if the straits are closed, it's barely going to affect U.S. oil prices. We're going to be able to produce, we're going to be able to consume, and so will our allies and anyone who wants to buy from U.S. Venezuelan oil.
Okay, so you say that U.S. is not going to be affected, and I can see Captain Bansal and Patrick wanting to respond to that. But I just want to play out what President Trump has said, that the war might actually drag on. Now, remember that Trump had claimed that we are not going to start wars. He spoke about endless wars, and now he says that this war might drag on. After Iran declared its readiness for a long war, the U.S. president also stated that military operation against Iran may last for as much as 4 to 5 weeks, emphasizing the preparedness of the U.S. to continue well beyond this time frame as well.
We have the strongest and most powerful, by far, military in the world, and we will easily prevail. We're already substantially ahead of our time projections, but whatever the time is, it's okay. Whatever it takes, we will always, and we have right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that. We'll do it. Whatever our objectives are clear. First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities, and you see that happening on an hourly basis, and their capacity to produce brand new ones, and pretty good ones they make. Second, we're annihilating their navy. We've knocked out already 10 ships. They're at the bottom of the sea. Third, we're ensuring that the world's #1 sponsor of terror can never obtain a nuclear weapon, never going to have a nuclear weapon. I said that from the beginning. They're never going to have a nuclear weapon. They were on the road to getting one legitimately through a deal that was signed foolishly by our country. And finally, we're ensuring that the Iranian regime cannot continue to arm, fund, and direct terrorist armies outside of their borders.
We didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it. Their war on Americans has become our retribution against their Ayatollah and his death cult. This is not a so-called regime change war, but the regime sure did change, and the world is better off for it. The mission of Operation Epic Fury is laser-focused. Destroy Iranian offensive missiles, destroy Iranian missile production, destroy their navy and other security infrastructure, and they will never have nuclear weapons.